Hi, I'm Pastor Mike Grobelch of St. John Lutheran Church in Long Beach, and I'm leading this study on the Book of Ruth. If you have questions or would like to receive an outline of the study, please send me a direct message on our Facebook page. Today we're picking up Ruth in chapter 2, starting at verse 11. And today I'm going to break it up a little bit differently than I have in the past because there's a lot to unpack. Ruth chapter 2, verse 11. Boaz replied to her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully reported to me, and how you left your father and your mother in the land of your birth and came to a people that you did not previously know. May the Lord reward your work and your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge." This is a rather interesting thing. In the ancient Middle East, when you lost your husband, the appropriate thing to do was to go back to your family's home, to your own people, to be supported and loved. But yet Ruth doesn't take that route. She goes with Naomi to a land where she doesn't have this support system. She doesn't know anybody, and she is putting her full faith and confidence in the God of Israel. And so when Boaz says, "Everything that you have done, I have been told." And then in verse 12, he says, "May the Lord reward your work and your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge." There are two things here that we need to make very, very clear. Boaz is actually going to be the tool that God uses to bless Ruth and Naomi. But more importantly is that a Gentile, someone born outside of the tribe of Israel, outside of the chosen people, can actually come in and be included in the chosen people. That is a very powerful witness, and it really harkens back to when Abraham is called, and Abraham is told, "You will be a blessing," and depending on how it's translated, to all people, all tribes, all races, however you want to put that. And here we see that Naomi and her sons were a blessing to Ruth, and she has adopted the Lord of Israel as her God, and she has moved from Moab to Judah as a result of that profession of faith. We pick up in verse 13, and then she said, I have found favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and indeed spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservants. Ruth continues her demeanor of being modest, and, actually she is saying something that is quite true. She isn't like the maidservants. She is not in the employ of Boaz. She is a foreigner, someone who is not of the people. But he puts her on that same level, and basically instructs his people to be kind to her in this regard. She may not have a relationship of service to him, but she has earned his kindness by her demeanor. In verse 14, at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here that you may eat the bread and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar. So she sat beside the reapers, and he served her roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied and had some left. When she rose to glean, Boaz commanded his servants, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not insult her. Boaz is setting a very high bar as to how the people in his employ should treat her. He is extremely generous to her. He is allowing her to eat the same food, the same meal as the men working in the field. Now, one thing I do want to point out, they talk about placing or dipping the piece of bread in the vinegar. And this was a drink usually of a mixture of vinegar and water, vinegar being slightly soured wine. There may have been even a little olive oil in it, but it was sort of a refreshing drink in the heat of the day. Think about maybe something tart like a 7-Up, where as you drink the 7-Up, it sort of has that sort of acidic taste at the back of your throat, and this is what this drink was. And grain roasted in the ear was a very satisfying and very simple meal. It was, I guess this is the original whole grain meal that they like to talk about. And she had eaten her fill. And then, when the others returned to work, she had some left over, and she was going to take that back to Naomi. But listen to what Boaz says, let her glean even among the sheaves, meaning the grain or the sheaves of the plants that had been gathered together that had fully the heads of grain. She's not gleaning on the edge of the field or the ends of the field. She is gleaning from the fullness of the harvest. And this is Boaz's generosity to her. And he also says, don't insult her. Don't be rude to her. And that is a really good example that we can learn from today. A lot of times when we walk by people who are not like us, they may be homeless, they may be different, and we tend to look down, we tend to treat them differently. We insult them either to their face or behind their back. And here Boaz is saying, don't do that. Don't interfere with her or heap shame upon her. Let her go about doing it. It's got to be a tough thing coming from a land where you know everybody and everybody knows you. And now she's a stranger in a strange land and has no really family or friends to look out after her. And Boaz realizes that, and hence his instructions. We pick up in verse 16. Also, you shall purposely pull out for her some grain from the bundles and leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. She took it up and went to the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she took it out and gave Naomi what she had left after she was satisfied. Purposely pulling out the stalks was, in essence, it was a gift. She didn't earn it. She didn't deserve it, but Boaz was giving it to her. And, now sometimes when they would separate the kernels from the husk, we're talking about roughly 3 pecks. And yeah, I had to look up what a peck was. We're talking about roughly, there are 2 different schools of thought, but we're talking about a significantly large quantity. We're talking several quarts of grain. And this was God's reward for her faithfulness in the performance of her duty. He is blessing her even in her time of need with rich measure. And she brought forth a pocket, or from a special package, the amount of roasted grain which she had saved from her plentiful meal. And this was a gift to Naomi. She was taking care of her mother-in-law as if her mother-in-law was her flesh and blood, her own family. And this devotion is, you'll see and have seen throughout the book of Ruth, that she continues to bring this sense of loyalty and sense of duty towards her mother-in-law. In fact, Ruth and the relationship of Ruth and Naomi is probably the antithesis of all the mother-in-law jokes that we all make, where the mother-in-law hates the daughter-in-law and vice versa. Something that very unusual, and Boaz is, we're going to see, has a special relationship with Naomi. Now, we pick up in verse 19. Her mother-in-law then said to her, "Where did you glean today, and where did you work? May he who took notice of you be blessed." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The name of the man who I work today is Boaz." Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed of the Lord, who has not withdrawn his kindness to the living and to the dead." Again, Naomi said to her, "The man is our relative. He is one of our closest relatives." Naomi is absolutely stunned by the amount of grain that Ruth brought home. Gleaners, by the very nature, would get very little. Perhaps if somebody working in the field felt a little kindness to her, they'd give her a little bit more. But what Ruth is coming home with is it's a boatload of riches as far as food. And through the offices of Boaz, God is showing his mercy, not only for the living, both Naomi and Ruth, but also to the dead, namely providing so richly for these 2 widows. And Naomi recognizes God's hand to the extent which it made her feel that it would not be the end of the interest which Boaz had taken in Ruth. Now, one of the things you might want to take a look at Genesis 24, verse 27, and it talks about the right to redeem the land belonging to Naomi's husband. by marrying the widow of his son. And that's also repeated in Leviticus 25:25. When the Israelites conquered the promised land and it was divvied up, there was a law that no Israelite could be separated from his land. Now, people got into debt, they got into trouble, and on the Jubilee year, they were allowed to redeem it back. They were also, if like in Naomi's case, where her husband had died through no fault of her own, a redeemer or a relative would be first in line to purchase it on behalf of the widow and restore the land back to that family. So none of the families of the nation of Israel would be cut off from the land. Now, this held true for the 12 tribes, but it did not hold true for the Levites. The Levites were their portion of the inheritance, if you will, was God himself. So Levites were in the area of the 12 tribes, but they did not have land or a section of land specifically set aside for themselves. And that's when you see how the temple sacrificial system worked, that the priests were allocated food from the sacrifice, that they too might live and enjoy God's abundance. Now, because we are coming to the end of the chapter, I included a couple extra verses. And in verse 21, we read, "Then Ruth the Moabitess said, 'Furthermore, he said to me, you shall stay close to my servants until they have finished all my harvest.' Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, 'It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his maids, so that others do not fall upon you in another field.' So she stayed close by the maids of Boaz in order to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law." Without paying any attention to the hint in Naomi's words, which she might not have fully understood. But this permission to keep with the laborers of Boaz until the end safeguarded Ruth against rude and bad behavior. Her safety was now assured, that she wouldn't be fallen upon and abused in other fields where she might not be as protected as she was in the fields of Boaz. And as we see, they talk about the barley and the wheat harvest. These two happen relatively concurrently, but not precisely. And by that, it's the barley would ripen first, and they would be in the midst of the barley harvest when the wheat would become ready for harvesting. So there was a sort of an overlap between the two. And this was the first part of summer. And her diligence and her not willing to relax allowed her to accumulate a great deal of grain through Boaz, but also, she didn't slack off because she was being found favorable in Boaz's eyes. And this is important because the tendency would be to, well, hey, they're giving me, grain from the sheaves. Why should I work so hard? But she remains diligent and hardworking, and she is blessed, by God through Boaz. And, these are, the fruits of true faith. When we are diligent, when we are set upon what our work to do, what our calling is in life, God will bless us. It may not be in the way that we would like to do it. You know, we tend to put a great deal of stock on money and power and influence and, you know, things of this world, where God will bless our lives richly with other things. Sometimes, yes, he will bless people with inordinate amount of money. Other times, maybe not so much of the monetary side, but he blesses them in other ways. And if we really are honest with ourselves, even the least among us in the United States is still pretty much in the top 1% of the world. And that's hard to believe. Out of, I think it's relatively 7 or 8 billion people, the people in the United States, where regardless of where you fall in the socioeconomic strata, are in the top 1%. And this is something amazing. And one of the things that has always struck me about Americans is that they are the first to donate food, money to those places that have a natural disaster or something. It's truly amazing. But here we see that Boaz is blessing Ruth, and by extension Naomi, because of their diligence, her diligence in working in the fields, something that we all would like to emulate. Next time we meet, we're going to begin in chapter 3. We'll begin with the first 10 verses in that. Ruth is a short book. It's got 4 chapters, so probably 2 or 3 more sessions and we'll be finished, and we'll be moving on to another study. Haven't selected that yet, but we will in the very near future, and I'll let you know that. For the members of Peace Lutheran Church and St. John Lutheran Church in Long Beach, we will be having communion on Sunday from 9 to 10:30 at St. John's. That's 6698 Orange Avenue. We'll be sending a letter out with this, and it will be on our Facebook page. God willing, we will have a joint service between St. John and Peace on the 31st of May at 9 o'clock. So please watch for details on that. Until that time, God bless your study, and may God bless you. Thank you.